We've got some exciting news for all you Marvel maniacs out there.
That's right. We're inviting you to join our exclusive Marvel Movie Minute membership program.
For just $5 a month or $55 a year, you'll gain access to a world of marvelous perks that will make you feel like you've been hit with a dose of super soldier serum.
As a member, not only will you get bad puns like that, you'll also get your own private podcast feed delivering early, ad-free episodes straight to your ears faster than Thor's hammer flying back to his hand.
And members also get access to periodic bonus episodes exclusively for our most dedicated fans. Consider it your own personal Jarvis for Marvel movie content.
Plus, you'll gain entry to our exclusive Discord community, where you can chat with other Marvel fanatics just like you. It's like you're assembling your very own team of Avengers.
Most importantly, by becoming a member, you'll be directly contributing to the show you love and helping us keep Marvel Movie Minute running strong. We value your support more than all the vibranium in Wakanda.
We can't thank you enough for being part of our journey through the MCU. You're the Pepper Potts to our Tony Stark, always there by our side.
You're the arc reactor to our Iron Man suit, the Heimdall to our Thor, the horny jokes to our Deadpool.
The gamma radiation to our Bruce Banner.
Well, maybe not that one.
I'm sorry.
So what are you waiting for? Don't be like Hawkeye, always getting left out of the action.
Head over to truestory.fm/join and become a member today.
Join us, and together we'll explore the Marvel Cinematic Universe like never before.
Step up to the streets and become the hero of your own story.
Excelsior, true believers. With your support, we'll make this membership program a smash hit. Before we dive in, here's another show you can enjoy in the True Story FM family of entertainment podcasts.
Hey, psst. Hey, you see that Snickers over there? If no one's looking, you should just take it.
No! Don't listen to him, my son. That would be stealing, and stealing is a sin.
Sin Schmin, it's a friggin' Snickers bar. You deserve to have it. Sinning really satisfies you.
Repent, my child. Virtue is the only real snack worth savoring. For that candy bar is merely a gateway to nougat damnation. Has this ever happened to you?
Listening to the devil on one shoulder and an angel on the other, and you're not sure what to think?
Then we're here to help. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Tommy Metz III, and this season on All the Feelings, we're examining the 7 deadly sins.
You know, the fun ones.
And the 7 heavenly virtues.
Which are also a thing. Through personal stories, historical oddities, and way too much embarrassment, we take you on a thrilling journey through all the goods and the bads you hear about in church.
But without all that pesky church stuff. So come join us for All the Feelings Season 9, a sometimes funny podcast about being human. All the sins, all the virtues.
All in one place. Go to allthefeelings.fun to learn more, or subscribe to All the Feelings wherever you get your podcasts.
Game over.
Do you like movies?
Do you like sports?
I never played that sport on the screen, but I really enjoyed how the movie made me feel.
Well then, have we got a show for you. The Adrian Moment is where my friend Ocean and I discuss the triangulation of sports, movies, and life.
We dive deep into the movies, discussing how they relate to and have affected our lives.
We will talk about why the sport matters to the movie, why you don't have to love the sport to enjoy the movie, and mine a few nuggets of meaning inside the story you may not have realized was really there.
After listening to our show, come join us for more conversations about the movies that portray the thrill of victory
and the agony of defeat.
Find the Adrian Moment podcast on your favorite podcast app and join us while we cover the sports you love and the ones you never think about.
You will never see sports or sport movies the same again.
Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, in which we assemble to explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 5 minutes at a time. In this, our 8th season, we're looking at Thor, The Dark World. I'm Pete Wright, and my constant companion, Matthew Fox. We are here to take on the shortest straw so far in the MCU Marvel Movie Minute lore. Matthew?
You know, Eternals is out there waiting for us, but I like a lot of things about Eternals. This is still definitely the worst.
This is going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting conversation. We are starting off. This is episode 1 for everybody. This is going to be our primer episode to get you ready with everything you need to know that really we don't even know what we're talking about. We've done our research. I've been reading comics galore, but we're movie people and lore people. We're not comic people. Still, we're going to give you a primer here of what you need to know to be ready for Thor the Dark World, just as we've been getting ready. So we're practicing in public. That's what we're doing right here. All right.
Most of what you need to get ready for this movie is copious amounts of alcohol, but like we can't provide that, although our sponsors might, but we certainly can provide you with the lore, the background, incredible knowledge about bit actors who you're never going to see again, the mythology, and really just all the things you need to be able to make this movie watchable. Because I promise there is a way to enjoy this movie as long as you don't try to enjoy the actual movie.
And we promise collectively, we've had this conversation together offline. We're not going to spend the next 23 episodes of our conversation together just dragging the movie, because there are people who could. We could. And so we want to celebrate what the movie is, how the movie is additive to the MCU. And, we're optimists. We're MCU optimists overall.
We're going to find the joy, and we're going to drag it a lot, but only when people are listening.
Okay, where would you like to start? You have been really mucking away at the first half of our outline here.
So let's start by talking about the different characters. And because one thing is this is a sequel, and so we're kind of jumping into the middle of a number of people's stories. Plus, this is the point where we are now solidly in phase 2 of the MCU, and so we're part of this wider, richer story. And so let's start with the characters and then use that to kind of expand out into the world. And as we go, we're going to talk about who these characters are from other sources and things like that. Well, let's kind of start with the character of Thor. Thor is obviously our name character, our main character. Who is Thor, as you understand him in the MCU?
Well, now Thor is, I feel like you should be able to start this conversation because you did the Marvel Movie Minute season on Thor. Thor has never been my favorite character in the Marvel universe. It's always been a sort of confusing entry for me in an otherwise very grounded grounded approach to superherodom. And so when I look at Thor, I see a cinematic approach to a character that is tied to the celestial and attempting to ground this mythical creature in an otherwise more grounded universe. And that to me is Thor.
I think that's a really good way to describe it. And that's going to be a really good way of framing how we're moving from the Thor of that first movie into this one. Because as you saw both me and Andy talk about at length, the original Thor movie was a Shakespearean character. And he really took the themes and the Thor character and the Loki character and the brothers struggling for the love of their father and all that, and made it into this Shakespearean epic that was somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but was clearly made by a Shakespearean director, Kenneth Branagh, who had grown up loving the Thor comics. And that was kind of a fun thing to carry him through. But then, Tony Stark asked him if mother doth know that he wears the drapes. Like, we kind of punched a hole in that balloon of the fun Shakespearean character by taking his world and putting it into connection with everyone else. And I think in later movies with Thor, we're going to find a way to make him work, which is to say, yes, he is kind of comedic and over the top and ridiculous. I think a lot of where this movie and we'll talk about it, but this movie is in kind of a hard place because we're still trying to do the Shakespearean Thor after that, we've seen him with the other Avengers and had to bring him grounded somewhat. But so again, just put him where he is. He is he is not a god as he understands it. Asgard is another planet on a different realm that they have great powers such that to our eyes as humans and what they call Midgard, they appear as gods to us, but they are normal. They do live, they do die. They just have lifespans that are much longer than ours and mythical powers that are much greater than ours. Kind of like Superman in the DC universe.
In terms of where Thor is for our primer, where is he? What has he been doing leading up to this point in the MCU?
So to start, remember that this is only the second movie in phase 2. The first one was Iron Man 3, in which he didn't appear. And so the last time we've seen him was at the end of Avengers, when Loki's plot with the Chitauri to take over New York and thus the world has been defeated. And he is taking Loki back to Odin to face justice, as well as to deal with all the things that have happened in the Nine Realms and what all that means for everybody.
Right. So that gets us Loki and Thor. They last we saw them, they took off from the Avengers back to Asgard.
Yeah, so he's taken them back to Asgard, and we're therefore we've kind of returned to the much more mythological world of all of this. And let me ask you, is that kind of part of where Thor loses you, that it feels so, grandiose and different than Tony Stark, who's just using earthly powers, and Captain America, who has this specific chemistry super serum? It's all science instead of mythology.
Yeah, a little bit. I think that's always been, and let me just say, I'm going to surprise you in a bit, but I have grown to really like Thor and appreciate Thor, and even appreciate the celestial side of the MCU. And so I figured it out. But I think this is where I was when I first saw this movie and was being introduced to Thor, and why I didn't really love the first Thor movie was because it felt a little bit like time travel tricks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, now we have space gods, then we can do anything. And if we can do anything, then what are the stakes going to mean to the other grounded heroes that we've already gotten to know? So I've never really appreciated that part of Thor. I think Hemsworth has done some really heavy lifting over the years to make this performance of this character feel like it belongs. But Thor on its own has always been an outsider to me for that reason.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair. One of the things that was interesting to me about doing the first Thor movie on that season of Marvel Movie Minute is I found I really enjoyed thinking about all the deep themes that were happening and just how rich it was when you really examined it on that minute-to-minute basis.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went back and watched the movie and it was like, actually, this is just an okay movie. It's not really very good. And I think kind of that's the thing. I'm looking forward to doing the same thing here. I think there are some great themes and stuff that are described. But I think in some ways, again, not wanting, like, there's one thing to just say, oh my God, this line is terrible. This line is terrible.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some of that because there's some terrible lines. But I think that we can also spend a lot more time talking about where this movie fits in the MCU, because I think we're kind of capturing what I think is a lot of the discussion of Thor as a character who's very much like the odd man out when it comes to the rest of the Avengers, especially at this point in the story. We don't yet have Guardians of the Galaxy. We don't yet have all the other sort of out in space stuff. We don't have the Eternals, certainly nothing like that.
Right.
And I think that this being post Avengers, it does put it in a really weird place. And so I think that's a lot of what we're going to talk about this season is how does this movie fit in how do we feel watching this after watching Avengers, after watching Iron Man 3, etc.
What is your background with the comic, the Thor comics? How much reading of the comics did you do when you did Thor, and did you do any reading leading up to this?
So my particular kind of ADHD kind of works in ways that like are connected to, I don't know, there's autism or anything like that, but like I have great trouble with pictures. Like my parents took me to Paris. I saw the Mona Lisa. I thought it was a woman with a smile. I didn't get it. Like I don't interpret graphical input very well. And so I was never really a comic guy. And I liked reading about the comics, and I spent a lot of time reading like people's analysis of different Thor runs and stuff like that. But I never really read many of the comics myself because it's just not a medium that connects for me. What about yourself?
Same goes. Like I did not. There were a couple of comics that I really got into, but Thor was not one of them. So I'm coming to Thor as an adult, trying to internalize all of the things that are going on in these books that were written in the decades ago, and make sense of them. And I'm finding it fascinating. But one of the reasons I bring it up, particularly in the context of the movie we're about to talk about, is that the legacy of Thor, as it is pulled from the comics of this movie, is a mess. And it feels reflective of where we were in the MCU, that the theatrical presentation was more important than allegiance to the comic lore, right? Because there's no real one story that you can come at and say, okay, if you read this arc, you'll know everything that you're ready for to get to this movie, right? The principal characters, Malekith and the Dark Elves, come from a Walter Simonson run in the 80s, which also introduced some other amazing characters like Beta Ray Bill, who we don't have any attention to in the film. But Walter Simonson is I think largely thought of as the guy who established the Thor that we see on screen in spirit, right? He's the guy who introduced, obviously, Malekith and the Dark Elves. His art style changed dramatically, and he wrote and drew the run. Like, he was the guy. He introduced the Norse mythology. He is largely credited with changing Thor's character development, giving him complex issues with daddy, making Thor this flawed and relatable dude, right? He was the defining Thor era creator. But then you get to stuff like the ether, right? The reality gem in the comics. That was a thing that you just don't feel like they knew what was coming in the MCU, that they had to do some retconning to make sense of what they did in this movie to make it make sense elsewhere. And so the lore, surrounding the Aether and its connection to dark forces, it all, aligns with these depictions of various Thor comics, exploring power and sacrifice and cosmic battle. But the reality stone, as we see it later in the Infinity Saga, it doesn't feel as much like that was a thing that they were really thinking about when they made this movie.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I think there's kind of two important things to think about there. One is that, like, when the first Thor movie was made, I think they like, when Iron Man is made and when Hulk is made, they might dream about the Avengers, but they're not actively working towards it. By this point, this movie is going to come out. When the first Thor movie comes out, Captain America's coming out quickly. They know they're working towards Avengers, but they really are mostly just doing individual setup stories. Now they're doing this MCU thing, which is now such an institution in movie making that we forget that it was new just 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And that even when this is 12 years ago, 2013, and at that point, like, we still had no idea what that meant. And there was starting to be this idea that we're going to build towards the Infinity Saga. So yeah, I think this is, I think, when we start having the needs of an individual movie and the needs of the movie to be a chapter in the Avengers story are sometimes coming into conflict. And I think the Ether Stone is very much one of those ways. And that actually, part of this allows me to transition to the other big thing I think we're going to be, we have to remember in talking about this character, is that Captain America, Tony Stark, while those are archetypes we've seen before, those are both made up from whole cloth by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby and the rest of the team at Marvel. Thor is not. Thor is a figure. Thor is no more made up by the comic books than Zeus or Hermes or Ra. They're, at one point in Scandinavia, northern Germany, and that part of Europe, the religious practices were they believed in a pantheon of gods, much like the Greeks or the Egyptians or many other peoples did, that included Odin and Frigga and Thor and all the rest. And while we don't have many sources, we do have a couple of what are called Eddas, which are sort of like these long poetic documents, very similar to like the Iliad and the Odyssey. And those are the source of a lot of the mythology ideas of Thor and Odin and stuff like that. And just as there are with Greek or with Celtic or Egyptian gods, while it's by no means one of the world's great religions, there are people today who practice what's often referred to as asatru or heathenry, which is the continued practice and worship of the Norse gods. And so there's this whole other aspect in which a lot of times we're drawing from that mythology. And so, for example, the dark elves do come directly from Norse mythology. The Aether does not. That's not a concept. That's a concept from like 19th century Britain and sort of pseudo-scientific ideas of the Aether and things like that, and possibly older than that, but that's where I first know of it. So we definitely have this kind of like largely mythological background that's filtered through the comics, but still is there, now being grafted on to this pseudo-scientific idea that's worked its way into the comics.
Well, let me ask you this. If you... forgive me for asking you to go back in time. If you think back to your experience talking about Thor and its emergence, the movie's emergence as a reflection of both the comic universe and the sort of Norse interpretation, I remember there were a lot of really wonderful things that came out of that movie that were straight from this mythological core.
Yeah.
The thing I'm really interested in this movie, as we talk about it, is to what degree is the success of Thor the character dependent on how well the movie sticks to or varies from that mythological core. If the mythology is so central to Thor as a character, can we have a good Thor movie if he falls away from it? And I'm looking at you, Love and Thunder. And, we'll get there. But
Right.
I legitimately think that's curious about this movie, and I don't have any answers yet. But I'm curious if you have any reflection after as the expert.
I think it'll be really interesting because, like, one thing I was thinking about, forgive me for a spoiler from the movie we're about to see. You want to skip ahead 20 seconds. But in Norse, like in Greek mythology, with very, very rare exception, gods don't die.
Yeah.
Gods are timeless. And in this, Frigga, Thor's mother, dies. And it's a major plot point for both him and for Loki, and will continue to be. And I remember picking up my phone and Googling just to make sure, like, Frigga doesn't die in the mythology. And no, she doesn't. She does have a son who dies. So there is death, in part because she represents motherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And motherhood at that time, like, if you're going to be a mother, you probably had 5
You have to
children,
represent loss. Yeah.
3 of whom would live past childbirth, past year 1 or so. But yeah, so that element isn't there. A lot, certainly the idea of him, mixing with others isn't there. So yeah, I do think it's going to be an interesting question that we go through, especially since the Dark Elves are a concept that comes from Norse mythology, but is very rarely talked about. And to give you a quick aside about that, the word for that is Svartifar. Again, apologies for pronunciation, which can be translated as the Black Elves or the Swarthy Elves, also called Mycofar, which is the Dark Elves or the Dusky Elves or the Murky Elves. And they're beings that live in that world. They're presented as antagonists, but they don't really do much, especially because the word that used for them is very similar, if not exactly the same, as the word that is often used for dwarves, the dwarves who create great things. And so there's an extent to which, like, yes, the Dark Elves exist, but all the mythology about them, unlike the Frost Giants, who were very much a rival of Odin and Thor in the mythology, the Dark Elves being a real rival of Odin and Thor is very much a creation of the comics in this movie.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's obviously a utility of the film. It's a utility to move the story forward. I want the purpose of the movie, in hindsight, to be able to introduce the reality stone in a way that feels authentic and earned and natural. That is me having the gift of seeing the entire Infinity Saga and knowing where things go. The degree to which the movie holds up is the big question, right? How well does the adventure hold up? The family theme, right? The family struggle, as you say, Frigga dies. We've got a lot of discussion in here about Thor taking over the mantle of his father. How well does that work? The sibling discussion. I mean, this is as much as it's a superhero story, it is, of course, also very much a family story. And how well does it achieve those ends? That will be our job.
And I think this is going to be a really good question. And I think at a later point, I'm going to talk to you about all the things happening in the MCU right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot. And I think that's interesting for the story, but I also think it might go to, we're going to spend a lot of time stepping behind the camera and talking about the making of this movie. This movie is made when they are starting to formulate plans to take the MCU and go much wider. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is coming out this same year, which is the first TV show they've done, which is obviously generating far more content. They're actively working on what would become the Netflix MCU, which at this point wasn't really clear if it was or wasn't going to be connected to this, but certainly the higher-ups at Marvel had a lot of input into that. Speaking of the higher-ups at Marvel, at this point, I don't believe Kevin Feige has been made sort of grand high poobah of that. The idea of sort of the making of the MCU, where there's Kevin Feige and he's kind of keeping an eye on everything as it all goes forward, that's not really established yet. So I think that
we should say, as a correction, he's been president of Marvel Marvel Studios since 2007.
Oh, okay. So I'll forgive that part, but nevertheless, the idea that they're expanding it so much right now, I feel like this move, like a lot of the ways in which this movie doesn't fit, may also be because this is when they're like, all right, we used to do one movie every 6 to 8 months. Now let's try and do a whole lot more all at once.
Right. Right. And now you speak of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like that's an example of a property that attempted to do the things that we wanted it to do at the time, which was to give us a more cohesive view of the Marvel universe, not just big screen, small screen. They tried it. And I think, Coulson as a character was such an interesting vessel for that and actually had a role to play in, in one of the Thor shorts. And so those are really interesting, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that this movie, I think, was in a sort of clumsy toddler era for the MCU.
Yeah.
And it shows a little bit.
And just to go further on that, in later seasons, they kind of stopped trying to make the continuity of this line up, the continuity of S.H.I.E.L.D. line up with the movies, although they somewhat do. But at this point, like, if you look at the air schedule for the first season and the second season of S.H.I.E.L.D., it is very much lined up with what's happening in the movies.
Yes.
This movie is going to include a Battle of Greenwich, and then literally the episode that airs after the weekend that movie came out is about the S.H.I.E.L.D. team doing the cleanup from the Battle of Greenwich. In S.H.I.E.L.D., they start to like look at the beginnings of things that are directly tied to what was happening in the Iron Man 3 movie. So yeah, there's all sorts of connections.
Yeah.
Way back 20 minutes ago, I had started this idea with let's go through the characters, and this is all tied into Thor, the character, but let's kind of like, as we talked about, this movie is struggling because it's like partially celestial and an Asgard, but also partially here on Earth. So let's talk about the primary Earth character, Jane Foster, played by Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I do like her. I have to say, I like Natalie Portman so much. I think I've always been a fan of the Jane Foster, the Darcy team, the Kat Dennings team.
Mm-hmm.
I think they are a very grounded team. The fact that we still get Stellan Skarsgård still suffering from all of the crazy movie after movie brain manipulation that he's dealing with is, I think, very funny. So, Jane, I don't have a real tie to Jane's role as, from the comic history. I haven't been watching her grow up over the course of the comic history, but I can say that in this, I actually am one of the maybe few people who buy the relationship between Thor and Jane. And I find they actually, to me, do have some charisma that I can invest in. And I say that as if to counter a future conversation in which we will be faced with there's no charisma between these two.
Well, and I will say, I'm going to admit that one of the biggest biases that I've had as a fan, that I've hopefully now mostly worked off, affected how I saw their relationship at first. Because as I've talked about at length over on my other podcast, Star Wars Generations, also a part of this family of podcasts, if you want to check it out. I was not a prequels fan for a long time, and I continue to think that that there's very little chemistry between Natalie Portman and Anakin Skywalker.
On that we agree. Violent agreement.
I remember being of Padme, and I remember being very confused because I had first seen Natalie Portman in The Professional, in which she's a 10-year-old playing a 10-year-old daughter of a mob family who's a lot darker and more bloodthirsty than you would want a 10-year-old to be, and the acting performance is chilling and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember watching her act like a wooden board in the prequels and not understanding what happened. And for a while thinking maybe she really is a terrible actress. And then later realizing that a lot of it's my own bias. And also it was, just like Haydenson, just like Christian Haydenson, that, it was bad dialogue and bad directing and all that kind of stuff. But so I think I watched the first movie with so much of that in my head that I just was like, nope, this is a terrible relationship. They can't act. And I didn't watch the second movie for a long time, to be very clear. Like, I went back and watched it just before the next Avengers was coming out because I was like, oh God, okay, fine. I have to know what's happening. But I think definitely after that rewatch that I did with Andy for this show, I really saw a lot more of their chemistry. And so I agree with you. Yeah. I really liked her character. I liked the groundedness. I liked that it felt a lot more like pseudoscientific babble, and the arc reactor is already pretty pseudoscientific babble, but
Right.
the science she was speaking didn't really make any sense, but I believed it a lot more. And so I think, yeah, I have a similar feeling about her. She's a grounded character. She's a romantic foil for Thor. And she's able to be the thing that grounds him a little bit in humanity, because she's also the one kind of calling him out.
Right.
And frankly, it was nice to, we talked about this a lot in the original one. She also is the kind of audience surrogate of saying, like, yeah, Chris Hemsworth is really hot and it's okay to just enjoy how hot he is.
Yeah.
And like, we get that from male characters gazing at women all the time. We don't get that very much of women gazing at men. And you know, having her and Kat Dennings just like interrupt their conversation because he's walking by without his shirt on. Like, I really appreciated that. And I was like, this is a dynamic most action movies don't have. So yeah, I like her character. I like where they're going with it.
Yeah, I think so too. And that is just the first chip that we'll take out of the wall of antagonism for you about this movie. I wonder what the next chip will be.
She is a character from the comics. Obviously, she's not in Norse mythology in any way, shape, or form.
Right.
At the end of the Thor movie, we had left her expecting Thor to come back, but then him having to break the Rainbow Bridge, so he doesn't have a way back or even a way to tell her that. And Heimdall is watching her and telling Thor about her. Obviously, by the time of the Avengers movie, we have seen Thor go back to Earth and then go back once again to Asgard, but she doesn't appear in that movie at all. And so we don't really know to what extent. She probably saw Thor on TV, as all of Earth did, but we don't know anything about what their connection is going into this movie.
Right. And he talks a little bit about it in the movie. Like, I was busy. I had to go protect the Nine Realms, and there was stuff I had going on. And I buy that. That's okay. We'll get into that specific minute. The interesting thing, you bring up the Rainbow Bridge breaking. I want to go back to this, to the comic and Walter Simonson's run. That like year-long run, the Surtur saga, is... I mentioned that the comic background of this movie appears to be quite messy. The Surtur saga actually is the seed, the sort of germinating seed from this movie and Ragnarok, because Surtur, of course, is the fiery demon that we see at the beginning of Ragnarok and ends up being the harbinger of the fall of Asgard, which eventually we will talk about. The fact that all of those elements, all of those characters, the Dark Elves, Malekith, Surtur, all of those, and Roger, yes, Roger was Thor's buddy for a while. We'll talk about Roger, maybe never, but I really liked Roger as I was reading these comics. All of those were tied into one sort of massive run over the course of a year for this character where everything changed and brought everybody to a new degree of depth. Everybody that was participating in this had a new degree of depth, and I think that's fascinating. So we will be talking about this same run when we come back around to Ragnarok,
definitely,
where Thor finally finds really solid footing.
Can we now talk about Christopher Eccleston as Malekith?
Malekith is such an interesting character because he was introduced in this comic run, right? This was a new thing, already mentioned. We don't have any history of Malekith, of who he is, before we come into this. There's no cinematic experience with Malekith, and in fact, the only connection to Malekith that we get in the prior movie is the what's it called? The Chest of Winter, that is a part of the first Thor movie.
Right.
Well, that was all part of the Surtur saga. And in fact, it was Malekith searching for this chest that was all a part of his ultimate game plan. That is not anywhere to be found in this movie. Malekith is just is our grand villain and is awakened from his slumber because of the activation of the ether.
Right. And we'll talk more about what you need to know. Basically, anything, if you're sort of wondering, what do I need to know about Malekith going into this movie? Nothing. Because there's nothing about him yet in the MCU. He is not a character who appears at all in Norse mythology. Like I said, the Dark Elves do. And I doing a little more digging, actually found there's another name that's often used for them, the Dolgulfar. So kind of one more iteration on it. Partially these is because we have a couple of different of those Eddas that have come down to us.
Right.
Most of which I think are written in Icelandic, one of which is written in German. I will say the one other place where do find Malekith appearing, because the creators of it were Marvel fans, is that the name Malekith is in the Warhammer factory battle, where it is the name of the leader of the Dark Elves. So that's the kind of deep cuts you're going to get on this episode.
Such deep cuts. We're going to talk about Malekith and the performance, Eccleston performance. I'll just say, in terms of setting up the experience of the film, I remember seeing it promoted that Eccleston was going to be in this film and getting very excited about it. Like, I was an enthusiastic supporter of having him in the movie. How well does it play out? We'll see.
Again, I don't know the order in which these were published, but how I watched them. By the time I got around to watching this, I'd already seen the first season of the revised Doctor Who, in which Christopher Eccleston plays the Doctor. Mm-hmm. And I thought he was fantastic in that. And I will say that one of the things that I liked the most was his facial expressions and his physical acting and his voice.
Who else?
So Loki is another major figure. And I think that's one of the things we're going to talk about this as we look into this movie, is Loki is an antagonist in this movie, but he's not the primary antagonist. And Loki, for those who either don't remember or you're new to this, he is the brother of Thor. He is an adopted brother. He was actually the son of the king of the Frost Giants, and Frost Giants have the ability to disguise themselves. And in the Norse mythology, he's the god of cunning, of tricks, and he's very much a trickster character. Sometimes as a, kind of a little bit benevolent, because they pull tricks on people to help them learn an important lesson, but often just in a malevolent, like, you just got to deal with this, like the booby trap that's always going to be on the stair because Pugsley leaves it out, and you just get used to it.
Right.
And a theme that we've had continually, both in the first Thor movie and in Avengers, is Loki being the younger brother who believes that he should be the king of Asgard once Odin passes, not his older brother Thor, and trying to either get Thor out of the way or establish a new kingdom for himself or do something else to earn his father's love. And that there's really the sense of he is the ugly redheaded stepchild. And I say that as a redheaded stepchild, though I'm gorgeous. But, that's kind of Loki's place in all this. And I think it's another thing that the movie is kind of wrestling with is now, because I think many people would say Loki is far and away the best part of that first Thor movie, and that Tom Hiddleston is just phenomenal and captivating. And we've now seen him do that twice. And I think one of the things that to me is a theme of this movie is people trying to figure out, how do we continue the idea that Loki is who he is and he still wants to kind of take over, but that we can't keep telling the same story over and over again. And so it's going to be an interesting idea of what do we do with Loki instead. But for the purpose of this primer, this movie begins when Loki has been captured by the Avengers, smashed by Hulk, puny god that he is, and Thor is taking him back to Asgard for judgment before Odin.
Where is Loki in the comics? Great question. So glad you asked. At this point, Loki is actually a collaborator with Surtur during the Surtur saga. So Loki is characterized as you would expect him to be. He's cunning, he's a manipulator, but he really is, he believes his rightful place is on the throne of Asgard, and believes that Surtur's motivations to destroy Asgard fit with Loki's motivations to sit on the throne. If he can settle the score between Odin and Thor, he will have a greater chance of taking over the throne and somehow have to figure out how to get rid of the giant flame monster who's going to actually destroy the nation. So that complexity that exists with all of those characters it's one of the things we're going to talk about in the film version, because you might be forced to question, does Loki have enough to do in this movie? Right. And in the comics, the argument that I would make is absolutely he does. And in the movie, it's an open question. I think it's worth talking about.
Definitely is. And I think this is when we first start to play with the idea of, can he be an antagonist but not necessarily a villain?
Yes.
Because in this, certainly, he does not like the goals of the Dark Elves. And that's one thing we'll talk about.
Right.
Just checking in with a couple of other characters. As you mentioned before, Dr. Selvig is just coming off being mind controlled by Loki. and we don't know what the effects of that are, but we know that that's going to have, given that Iron Man is all about the effects on Iron Man of just seeing all that happen. I think we can assume, and does come up, that Dr. Selvig is going to be very affected by that. Darcy wasn't really a part of all that, so we don't know where she stands. And the Warriors 3 and Sif, they weren't a part of the Avengers at all, but they're obviously still kind of like Thor's bosom buddies. They go with him where they go with him. So they're kind of on Asgard waiting to help out. Sif is still longing for him and pining in a warrior way. In the mythology, Sif is not a warrior. She is married to Thor. And she very famously has this beautiful, beautiful blonde hair that in one of the stories, Loki kind of plays a trick and cuts it all off.
Okay.
But, yeah, so her character in this is very much a divergent, but because there's no Jane Foster, so we just have a whole new thing.
Right.
So
okay.
Let's talk about what else is happening in the MCU. First of all, this movie does happen chronologically just about the same time as Iron Man 3. I think it's a little bit after. But during the course of this year, all those things have been happening and building up to that. The PlayStation 4 is released during the course of this year, just for anyone who wants to kind of place it and think about what's the technology level happening at this point. We have smartphones, but they're a lot less able to do the things that we're able to do. And most of what's happening right now are things that are happening in the shows that are connected to the MCU, but we don't really know how much they are or are not canon. Going way back in history, some people, and mostly what we're getting is set up for those. Like, we didn't see any of this stuff happen, but in stuff that will come out in a year, 2 years, 3 years, a lot of them have flashbacks to stuff that happens in 2013. Almost no one saw it except myself and maybe 6 others, but one of my favorite shows from Marvel was The Runaways.
I watched every episode.
Yeah.
I'm right with you.
This is the year when the Church of Gaborin starts kidnapping runaway kids, and if that alone doesn't make you want to go watch this show, well, I can't help you. This is the year when S.H.I.E.L.D. is like organizing its team and getting started, and then eventually, as I said, the show S.H.I.E.L.D. is happening concurrently with this movie. And in the Daredevil universe, a lot is happening. This is the year that Hoffman and Blake start working for Wilson Fisk. Foggy and Matt graduate from Columbia Law School. Famously, Foggy is cum laude and Matt is magna cum laude or summa cum laude. And as Foggy says, the summa doesn't really matter. Poindexter starts working for the hotline, where he falls in love with someone but proves to be a little too volatile. Frank Castle does all sorts of cute things with his family that he can have flashbacks about, and then begins his tour in Afghanistan, where everything goes wrong. And a man named Carl Lucas goes off to Seagate Prison for a crime he didn't commit, in which he will be the subject of crazy medical experiments and come out not Carl Lucas, but Luke Cage. And lastly, this is the year when a woman named Jessica Jones is convinced to try and become a hero and starts flying around the city dressed up as someone named Jewel, who eventually captures the attention of a man in purple named Kilgrave. All that happens this year.
And happened to be 4 of the stories that I deeply wish would come back and continue. I miss those small screen Netflix stories.
I've heard a rumor that there's some part of the Netflix MCU has been on TV, but for some reason my TV doesn't get reception, and so I haven't been able to see any of that new Daredevil show. So it just doesn't exist for me.
Oh, now.
I put an episode on that on my other podcast, Superhero Ethics.
Yes, you did. All fire. Okay, so now we've talked about the comics, we've talked about our history, we've talked about the things. What do people have to get to expect from our contribution together to the Marvel Movie Minute podcast universe this season?
So first of all, continuing the tradition that was just established by the last season of the show, we're going to continue to do 1 episode a week, where in that 1 episode we talk about 5 minutes at a time instead of breaking down exactly minute by minute. We'll still do the same level of analysis, but we won't have to be like, well, we only discuss the first half of that word because he says the first half of that word and then it cuts off before the next minute, etc. But we will talk about kind of the breakdown. We're going to talk about like, what's the exact stuff that happens? How does it relate to the larger story? But also sometimes it'll be like, oh, we get this bit actor for 10 seconds. We recognize that actor from such and such or so-and-so or whatever. We'll talk about the connections to the wider MCU because there are a bunch of both references to things that have happened and things that will set up stuff that will be connected to stuff that comes after it that becomes very important. The death of Frigga is going to have a big impact on both Thor and Loki, as it should, for a lot of the rest of the movies going forward. We're going to talk about these characters in other formats, as we discussed, like how does it connect to the comic books? How does it connect to the mythology? I don't think we're going to discuss Malekith in Warhammer, but if some listeners really excited for that, I'll take a few minutes and read about that and tell you more. But please don't be excited about that.
Don't be excited about that. We beg you.
We're going to teach me a bit more about movies. For anyone who did not listen to that first season of, for anyone who did not listen to that earlier season of this podcast where we talked about the first Thor movie, every now and then Andy would make this really insightful connection about the filmmaking or the camera angle or how this or that. And I would go, huh? And Andy did his best, but I think we're going to have a little bit more of an intentional this time of we're going to discuss those things, understanding that Pete is really the expert. And while I'm not coming at it with the background knowledge, I'm still seeing the camera angle. I'm still seeing the interesting movie making techniques, even if I don't know what they are. And so I think we'll give you a little bit of that like pro-am conversation on what's actually happening in the movie and how does it work and how does it not work.
You know, anybody who joins to support the ongoing work of the Marvel Movie Minute podcast at truestory.fm/join gets access to early episodes, in this case, quite early, because we also give you access to watch the live stream recording sessions as we're recording and join us for a Q&A after that if you're up for it. We would love you to join. And I say quite early because Matthew is expecting a massive life change, and we have to hurry and get it done before the life change happens. And so we are actively releasing Iron Man 3 minutes right now, and you'll note we're already recording Thor starting now. So every Wednesday, our target right now is just about every Wednesday, 2:00 Pacific time. We're going to be settling in for our live stream conversation. We hope you'll add it to your calendar, and we'll let you know as things change. But if you become a member of the supporting level, you'll get access to all of those and early access and ad-free access, and it's all the stuff that you get. But mostly know that there is a rotating team of hosts. Kyle and Rob have done a fantastic job with Iron Man 3. They're going to take a break. We're stepping in for Thor because everybody else stopped answering the phone when we said who wants to do Thor. But it's a real team approach that brings you Marvel Movie Minute, and we appreciate your support of all of us that rotate through the hot seats as we do this show, and supporting us for a few bucks at truestory.fm/join helps us to do just that.
Yeah. Really excited to have that. It's just a great way also to get more input, because I always think about these podcasts as a discussion. And while anytime Pete has been a guest on my podcast, we've proven that Pete and I can bullshit with each other for hours and hours and hours and hours on end. We love hearing from you. And so whether it's going to be emails you sent in or messages, or even better, live commentary during the feed, it just helps broaden the discussion. It makes this more of a back and forth between us and all of you, because I'm sure there are many people out there who love this movie. I'm sure there are many people who find that this movie is very enjoyable if you watch under certain circumstances that might have to do with your blood chemistry at the time, or might have to do with something else, whatever it is. And again, if you are one of those people who watch this movie, I respect that. I completely allow you to be wrong. I mean, etc.
You're so gracious. So gracious.
My point is, part of why I do the Star Wars podcast that I do is it's with 3 different people who all saw the movies at different times in their lives, different generations. And I love hearing people appreciate the things that I don't appreciate. And it helps me see it in a different light. I'm never going to make fun of you, except for right now. I'm never going to do any of those things. I want to hear from people who love this movie and can tell me why I should love it. And it'll affect how I watch it for sure.
Well, I'm very excited about that, because the biggest surprise, I've been panning this movie. I've been dragging it since I saw it. And I have in my head canon for the Marvel movies that I love and not so love, this movie has always been at the bottom of the list. And I am blown away to report that I watched the whole movie and I did not hate it as much as I expected to. with that glowing review. I actually found much more to like about this movie. I didn't find it nearly as dark as I remembered it to be. And do I have problems with the movie? Absolutely. But I think that's going to make the conversation that much more fun, especially knowing that I like the movie more than you like the movie. And I can't believe that I am coming to you saying that. I did not expect that at all.
Well, I feel a little set up, to be honest, because I started this out going, okay, I can't talk about how much I hate this movie. I can't talk about how much I hate this movie.
Yeah.
And then one of our first planning sessions, Pete was like, oh God, this is a terrible movie. And
Yeah,
I thought,
I did.
yes,
I said that.
Yes,
I said that. But that was before I'd watched the movie
I
again.
can have a conversation. And now, so Pete kind of got me out on that board of it's okay to hate this movie. And then Pete yanked it out from under me. So
I like to stand behind you as you go out on that limb, that tree limb, with a saw.
There we go. There we go. So you'll have a good amount of jocularity between the two of us as we go through this. We will occasionally have guests. So it's not just the two of us spouting nonsense, and we can get some like other more expert opinions in this. But it will mostly be Pete and myself going through this. We're gonna have a lot of fun. So does that mean we should go into this week's weekly ranking just so that everyone can hear it and see what the great stuff they get?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
So for this week's ranking, the question is, how would you rank all the movies in which Thor appears? And specifically in terms of how much do you like Thor in that movie? And just a quickly review, the options are Thor, the first Avengers movie, Thor the Dark World, the one we're about to do, Age of Ultron, Ragnarok, the Infinity War and Endgame. Kind of combining them too, I want to give you some like highfalutin movie reason, but it's because I don't honestly remember exactly what he does in which movie, so we're combining them as one. And then Thor Love and Thunder. So start at the bottom, Pete. Which is, to your mind, the worst of these?
It's Love and Thunder.
Really?
It's Love and Thunder. Yeah. And I'll stand up with you if you want to do Love and Thunder when it comes time for the MMM assessment of it. But I had a rough time with that movie for a number of reasons. I saw it more recently than any of these other ones, with the exception of this one. I feel like we got so far out on the Taika Waititi ledge that I think the comedy outdid the merits of Thor, and I really, really struggled with that.
That's fair. I definitely feel a little bit differently about it, which I'll talk about when we get to that in the ranking, but I'll say I understand where you're coming from, and I think that I like that movie a lot more than others, but it did struggle with some things. For me, though, the worst one is Dark World, and I just don't think there's much interesting for him to do in this. And again, I'm open to seeing that change.
Yeah.
My next one is going to be Age of Ultron. I really like that movie. I think a lot more than a lot of people, but I don't think he really gets to do much that's very interesting in it. It seems a lot of it is about this very human idea, and in a lot of ways, it sort of feels like him and Captain America are both the ones kind of battling against Tony Stark and Bruce Banner, and I feel like they could have like set him up with something a little more interesting. Yeah, so I think that's kind of my next on the list. What about yours?
Well, I would put The Dark World on, up above Love and Thunder. So for all of the same reasons.
Right. So what's your next one?
Next one above that. Oh, it's tricky. I think I'll probably say Thor above that. And now we're getting into territory where we're in the gray area of movies that I have that I appreciate, much more. And, I just feel like Thor represents the ideation of this character that we didn't understand quite yet. He had the hair and the eyebrows, and I just don't think they knew what this character was. I don't think Hemsworth knew what the character was completely yet. And even though it had so many interesting things going on, it was a bit of a clumsy, first run that had promise.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with that. I think I have this movie in the same place. And for me, it's especially because we said which is our favorite representation of Thor.
Yeah.
I think the movie itself I'd place a lot higher. But, if you could give me my perfect, in the same way that there's like the edit of Phantom Menace that cuts out Jar Jar entirely. If you could give me an edit of this movie that's just Loki and Odin going through their stuff together, that's what I'd want to watch.
Yeah,
frankly.
that's a very different movie. Right.
Hemsworth, I think, really grows into his role, especially as a comedic actor. But
Mhm.
at that point, I think he was up against two Shakespearean superstars in Hopkins and
Yes.
Hiddleston. Hiddleston was as we talked about, Hiddleston was doing a play with Kenneth Branagh, I think one of the Henrys, when they found out that Branagh was going to direct this movie, and he like went to him backstage and was like, "Hey, I need to be in this movie of yours." So I don't think I think that just Thor is just one of the worst parts of his own movie, and that's
Yeah.
unfortunate. For my next one, I guess now this is number 3 on no, we're counting back out. So this is 4. My next one is now Love and Thunder, and I think I like the Taika Waititi-ness of it. I like the comedy of it. I think that works really well for me. To me, I think the only reason why it's so low is that it introduces the idea of this incredibly interesting theological notion of what are the gods and what does it mean to be a god. And I feel like that was too serious, and Thor having to question his role in all that. And I think that was just way too serious a story to pair with the comedic nature that Taika Waititi is going for. Because I kind of think like if you did either one of those two things, you'd have a great movie. In this, I still think it's a very good movie. It's just nowhere near as good because it's trying to do this one thing that doesn't fit with everything else that Waititi is doing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and I think Christian Bale gets in many ways short shrift on that movie because it's such an extraordinary part for him in a movie that would be great if it was just a focus on their antagonistic relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have Zeus, and I can't abide.
No,
I can't abide.
Can't do it.
Okay, so I think I will move to Ultron. I'll move to Age of Ultron. You've already said it. I think I really like that movie, and I also think he doesn't have the most to do in it, but he's still funny.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think for me, the next one on the list is Avengers. And here's where I start to really, really enjoy his performances. I think, unlike maybe this one, in Avengers, they really did a great job of cutting Thor back down to size, because I think a movie with a literal god from human perception up against a guy in a metal suit and a guy who can punch really hard is really hard to do. But they managed to make it work. And I think especially by making Loki the main antagonist, it gives Thor so much to do and really allows Thor to be kind of a comedic character in a way that he hadn't been before, because he's sort of like, he's helping the humans deal with this. And he just normally doesn't partner with people on the realms he goes to. But, there's moments where it's like, Loki is doing bad stuff and another Avenger talks to him and is like, wait, is he your brother? And Thor goes, he's adopted. It's just like those little moments of throwaway humor, the talk between him and Tony Stark and the constant rivalry between those two that I think they really kind of nailed it in that movie.
I'm at Avengers now too on my list because I feel like they demonstrated the thing I was most concerned about, which was, can they put all of these giant ego-driven characters on the screen at the same time and make them compelling and make their relationships interesting and make it feel like a team? And that movie was successful in that regard for me. And I was blown away by how well it worked for me. So Avengers definitely next on my list. My turn. So are we putting together Infinity War and Endgame? I think we are. I think that's what we said, the rule. So it's next is Infinity War, Endgame. This is where we end up with, I think it's a bit of a return to form, to the sort of the scope and scale of the Shakespearean kind of impact of story, but we're doing it now in a completely unleashed, unhinged universe of trauma. And I find that both of these movies together to be absolutely irresistible. I think they are wonderful. I think everybody in it has something fantastic, but Thor's expression of grief, his need for vengeance, his partnership with the Guardians of the Galaxy, to confront Thanos, that whole roller coaster ends up being just sublime for me. I think he has some really great stuff to do.
I think that's what really showed me that Chris Hemsworth can be both very comedic, and he is very comedic at times in those movies, but also an incredible actor. And especially in the, as you said, the after effects of killing Thanos. And for me, one of the most poignant moments of my life, in other parts of my life, I've been a political activist for my 25 years now. And one of the campaigns I've worked on a lot is the death penalty. And I remember hearing a speaker talk about how his child had been executed, and he went to go see the execution of his child's killer. And then he woke up the next day and his child was still dead, and he didn't feel any better. And it was really this powerful story about the emptiness of vengeance and how it doesn't actually do anything. And having that, getting to see Thor go through that, along with, for me as someone, that one of the biggest ways that my weight loss, that one of the biggest ways that my depression manifests itself is in weight gain. And yes, it's played for a lot of humor, but there's something so powerful about the fact that the character doesn't lose all the weight in order to be a hero again. He just gains his confidence while he still has the big belly. And then, of course, he loses it because you're not going to pay Chris Hemsworth all that money and then not show off his body. But like, to just get one movie about that, of like, no, being heroic isn't about losing the weight. It's about finding your confidence at whatever size you are. I just really loved it. And it will always be something very special to me.
Totally agree.
And since that was both of our number twos, I think it's pretty clear. Our number one, Ragnarok. Ragnarok is just the perfect, for me, blend. It's sort of like if Thor is a Shakespearean tragedy, Ragnarok is a Shakespearean comedy. Because it is still very Shakespearean. It's these epic themes of family and loss and secrecy and vengeance and good and evil, wrapped up in just kind of saying, like, you know what, Thor is kind of ridiculous, and we're going to allow him to be kind of ridiculous, and we're going to poke fun at that. And the fact that it starts with that scene of him kind of speaking this great speech to his enemy demon while he's hung up on a chain, slowly rotating, and then having to pause because he's not facing the guy anymore. It was just like that started me laughing in a way that I haven't stopped laughing about that movie ever since. And yeah, it's my number one.
Well, and Taika Waititi's, contributions there are, I think, dose perfect. Right. That's like, I absolutely appreciate the humor and the pace and the structure, and all of the over the top characters are over the top, but just to the point where they're funny and not too far. We get his own creature, the rock creature. We get, Goldblum. We get some of the most sort of allegiant interpretations of the comic lore from, again, the Surtur saga are displayed in that movie perfectly, like picture perfectly. And I think that's just a real testament to how much they appreciated that film and making the film. And you could just, it just feels right. It feels like that was the pinnacle of Thor's contributions to the MCU. And now we're just riding it out.
Yeah.
I do have one more to add that I think would be a number one with an asterisk, which is Thor's a portrayal in Doctor Strange, the post-credit scene in Doctor Strange, where Doctor Strange keeps filling up the beer and he keeps drinking it. So there you go. Not a full film, but he was in it.
Yep.
And I thought it was funny.
Yeah, his facial expressions as the hammer comes, flying towards him while breaking every single thing in Strange's museum office is pretty classic. So I'd put that number one with an asterisk too.
Yep, for sure. And there we are. This is the end of episode 1 of season 8 of Marvel Movie Minute, and who knows, it'll air sometime in months. So we've recorded it, we're going to edit it and put it on a shelf, and I can't wait for it to actually see the light of day. Thank you, everybody, for downloading and listening to this show. Don't forget, you can head over to truestory.fm/Discord if you want to join the public Discord community. We have Marvel Movie Minute channels in there. And again, if you want to become a member, truestory.fm/join to learn more. Thank you for everybody downloading and listening to the show. On behalf of Matthew Fox, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll see you next week.
I'm Matthew Fox. May the force be with you.